All right. So hello, and welcome everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us today and coming to this month's Fundraising Academy webinar, Stewardship and Engagement, Increasing Donor Loyalty. For those of you who are new to our webinar series and joining us for the very first time, I'm so happy to have you all. I'll introduce our incredible presenter in just a few minutes, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Fundraising Academy program on the next slide. For those of you who are so interested in learning about donor stewardship and engagement, we are here for you. Fundraising Academy and our cause-selling education prepares nonprofits, their fundraisers, their staff, their board members, all for greater and measurable impact by providing tons of learning opportunities that you can use to enhance your cause and therefore your community and the world. Before we get started into the content today, I have a couple of notes. This webinar will be interactive, so thank you for making the chat so engaging. We are excited to speak with you there. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions during as well as in the dedicated 30-minute Q&A following the presentation. So go ahead and feel free to submit any questions you have for our presenter in the Q&A option of their Zoom controls. I also want to note for accessibility that closed captioning is available for this webinar. To enable this setting, you will click the CC option in your Zoom controls and adjust the caption size in video settings under accessibility. And last but not least, in the days following this webinar, you will receive an email with a link to access both the slide deck and the recording to review at your leisure. My name is Sarah Wu. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program manager for Fundraising Academy. I have the pleasure of serving as both your technical and spoken aloud moderator for today's webinar. And I'm really excited to be joined by this month's presenter. Muhi Khwaja is the other friendly face you see on your screen. Muhi is a wonderful and dynamic instructor for the Fundraising Academy. A little history about Muhi. After earning his bachelor's in history and psychology from the University of Michigan, Dearborn, Muhi did not know what to do with his life until the summer before graduating. He went through a development summer internship program at U of M, and it sparked an interest in a burgeoning fundraising career. After working with several nonprofit organizations, he earned a master's in public administration, specializing in nonprofit management. Muhi over here has over a decade of experience as a development professional with several nonprofits, University of Michigan, the American Non-Cross, a founder of the American Muslim Community Foundation, just to name only a few. In 2016, he became a CFRE, a Certified Fundraising Executive. He's joined the Maven Project as Chief Development Officer in 2021, where he oversees fundraising strategy to help provide more access and equity to comprehensive medical care, especially for vulnerable populations across the country through community health centers and expert medical volunteers. Muhi is going to be joining us today as a collaborative partner in conversation on stewardship and engagement. He's got a robust background on how to work with donors and connect them with the means to create impact. So welcome, Muhi. We're so excited to learn from you.
Well, I'm so grateful for that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I have the immense pleasure and honor of calling you a colleague, and you make Fundraising Academy fantastic. So thank you so much, Sarah. Everyone, I'm so honored to be here with you today. We're talking stewardship, and we're here to learn a little bit more about fundamental steps. Each of you are here because you want to quit pressure, but more importantly, this is stuff that you guys are doing every single day. So we're hoping that you get to understand the value of donor loyalty and what it means to your organization that you get to learn the keys to retaining a higher number of donors, and that you get to build systems to showcase donor impact, to foster their continued commitment to your cause. And each of you likely work at some amazing nonprofit organizations. And why don't you drop a few of them in the chat as well, so that the people that are watching can learn more about the different causes and how your donation pages look like. Anybody ever go look at those donation pages and see what they look like? I know I do. And we're really here to look at stewardship, looking at meaningful follow-up activities that you can do, and help them move forward in an ongoing way as your donor and lifelong support, hopefully. So, with that being said, we're going to jump right in, and feel free to keep the chat active and fresh, and we will have a fun time doing it. So, to kick things off, we have a poll. Pretty scary question, I think. So, do you trust artificial intelligence? So, let's see what people think.
Thanks, Muhi, for kicking us off with a really engaging and fun poll. So our question for you is, do you trust artificial intelligence? A poll will appear on your screen. You can click yes, no, or maybe I'm with Sarah Connor. Please go ahead and select your answer so we can see what our audience thinks about AI today. All right, we have about a little more than half of our guests participating. I think we're all thinking about it, right? It's definitely top of mind as we think through what engaging stewardship looks like today, and how to use tools that are really happening in the world as we speak. We have so much access to technology, and so I'm excited to see what folks respond to this question with.
Yeah, and I'm actually thrilled that we have the Sarah Connor bit in there, and I hope people catch the reference to Terminator, because one day AI is going to take over. We're all out of jobs. We're all just doomed.
The question is, how do we work with them, right?
Exactly. I love seeing a few organizations listed in the chat: Living Water International, Women's Cancer Resource Center, American Cancer Society, Global Human Rights, Home Again, Mission Economic Development Agency, and several more. So check out all the different organizations. And a little hot tip as well: if you guys put HTTPS:// and then www your URL, it'll actually be a hyperlink in the chat. But yeah, I think we can end the poll.
Let's see what folks think about our poll question. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and then share our results with our friends. So it looks like of the folks in the room that have answered our question, we have 15% of folks who answered yes, I trust artificial intelligence. 30% of folks say no, and 55% say maybe.
Yeah, and maybe we can convince some of those maybes or nos to the yes side. We'll see. So I want to share a little bit more about the cause selling cycle and what we teach here at Fundraising Academy. So the cycle includes 8 essential steps. If you've been on our webinars, hopefully you live and breathe this as well and know about our fantastic book called Cause Selling. So hopefully in this book you see more of these principles easily taught to you and your team. It's a good intro book. It's a good refresher book, and I live by it. So in phase 1, it's all the work necessary to prospect qualified potential donors. Phase 2 is all about face-to-face time with prospective donors. And phase 3 includes everything after the gift is given, what you should be doing. So these are all fantastic things that you can find on our website. And we're focusing on step 8, stewardship. And although it's the last step in the cause selling cycle, it's probably one of the most important. And it's important because you need to foster loyalty and strong donor stewardship, and what those practices are will help deepen the relationship with your donor. And this is all about making your donor feel valued and informed on how their donation is being invested by your organization. So take a look at the fundraising-academy.org, and you can learn more about the cause selling cycle. So this is why I'm interested in artificial intelligence. And what I love to see included with artificial intelligence is the use of emotional intelligence. I'm sure many of you have heard about ChatGPT, and it's been taking off. They got to 1 million users. So like social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, and all these other places took months, if not years, to get millions of users. And ChatGPT was within a few months. And it's really remarkable because what this did, it created this letter for me in less than 20 seconds. It was just typing, and it's really eerie when you see it live. And I hope that when you utilize ChatGPT, you definitely edit it, and it's a good first draft, in my opinion. It will help you be more donor facing, because generally speaking, if you had to make a new thank you letter, or if you had to make some sort of commitment to your donor, then perhaps it would be a little bit more of your time. And I see some people are having some audio concerns. Hopefully, you can hear me clearly. And if not, I can try to use a microphone as well. So please let me know if you can or cannot hear me, and we can adjust it. But hopefully through this, 20 seconds in a full letter, and then you can add in your mission, you can add in your organization name. And the more specific you get with your prompt, the more intricate your letter will be and response will be. And Christine makes a great point in the comment. A little grammar to fix, but it's a pretty strong letter. So you can give it more prompts based on your mission. You can give it more prompts based on your geographic service area, and so much more. So I highly would encourage you to at least play around with it, see if it's something that would be beneficial, and see what other ways in which ChatGPT and artificial intelligence could be implemented at your organization. I know for a fact at American Muslim Community Foundation, we have a very limited staff, we have a very limited budget, so we asked it to create 30 different social media posts for us, what the content should be, what the caption should be. And it was really helpful in our year-end 2022 fundraising campaign. So very unique ways in which you can utilize artificial intelligence. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we focus our time, where we prioritize our time. So in one of the ways in which you can do this is, a lot of the time what ends up happening is we can get stuck behind emails, we can get stuck behind other to-do lists that we have. But when it comes to cultivating donors, many fundraisers spend little time doing their actual job around it. So how can we encourage our major gift officers, our directors of development, and others to be more donor facing, having more interactions? So if fundraising is an actual part of your job description, whether you're an executive director or a frontline fundraiser, how much time do you actually engage in connecting with prospective donors and current donors who are in your portfolio? And if you actually track that time out of your 40 hours, what does that actually look like? So you really want to look at who's in your portfolio. And if you are a corporate giving officer, or you are an individual giving officer, or you're the one person on your team that has to do it all, including events, how do you prioritize your one-on-one donor interactions? And what will help you with that is creating an efficient communication strategy. And if you're at a small nonprofit, like I have been in the past, you may need to create that communication strategy. So when you spend the necessary time and resources to create targeted and segmented lists, whether that's for phone calls or for handwritten letters or for email, that is how you can ensure that the right people, hopefully with capacity and a desire to give to your cause, are actually seeing your messages and are engaged with your mission. So you can also splice it in ways to segment the list with donors from the previous year, or donors who are lapsed, or donors who gave this year. So think through in the chat, what are other ways in which you can integrate AI?
This is an awesome conversation, Muhi. So thank you for starting us off with such an engaging poll question, but tying it into really what we do as fundraisers. So we'd like to hear from you in the chat. How would you use AI in your job to help cultivate and steward donors? I think it is really important. Something that we teach here often at the Fundraising Academy is relationship-driven fundraising, which means for us, building genuine connection with others. Maybe that's other colleagues, like we are here doing in the chat, sharing about our organizations and the causes that we care about, but also building relationships with those one-on-one donor interactions, and being so paramount. I know we are all incredibly busy. We have a lot on our plates, and it's hard to prioritize that one-on-one face-to-face. So we'd love to hear from you in the chat, to everyone. What are some ways that you might use AI, or even I would say technology, at large, to help communicate and cultivate and steward your donors? So I'm going to go ahead and read aloud for our folks who are listening to the recording as well, some of the answers that we have from our colleagues. So Miguel notes, I use AI to help me find new donor strategies or ideas that I can incorporate into my strategy. I love that use of technology for idea generation. Sometimes I will just ask AI about donor stewardship strategies, see if there's anything we don't currently do. Christine shares, I use it to create a fresh thank you letter once a month, maybe some event marketing copy. There are lots of ways to utilize technology to help you prioritize those one-on-one donor interactions. I love that. Any thoughts, Muhi?
Yeah, I love these suggestions as well. And even the event marketing copy, or what you should be including in email newsletter. A lot of the times coming up with that takes a significant amount of time. But again, for a first draft, something that you can share with a team member and get things going. I think using a tool like ChatGPT is really cool and innovative. I think the human touch, the emotional intelligence is going to be a very important part. So again, don't just slap it together and hope that it sticks, but really look at how it can help you enhance the variety of touch pieces that you're creating for your donors.
I love that, Muhi. I love the the note about variety, right? We're talking about, he grounded us in the cause selling cycle of Fundraising Academy, and it is a cycle. We're talking about step 8 stewardship, but how can you use these tools to really navigate that holistic look at a donor relationship? And the last thing before we go on to the next slide, I'll share from the chat. Natasha mentioned we talked about using it to help create topic-specific content for an email series. Again, that idea generation, that sort of lead generation, or ways to get your team thinking about specific copy to support your work. I love that. Thank you all for sharing in our community share in the chat.
Fantastic. So what does a major gift mean at your organization? Also, another call to action for that chat. Let's keep it going. I know at other organizations, it varies. When I was at the University of Michigan, it was $100,000. And then when I was at the American Red Cross, major gift was $2,500. And at American Muslim Community Foundation, we determined that it was $1,000. So if you're not working with individual donors on a one-on-one basis to raise major gifts, this is a good time to start. And I see other organizations are also at that $1,000 mark in the chat, and they qualify donors at that level as well. So that's really great to see. And major gifts, you need them for your annual fund. Of course, if you've done a capital campaign, they're super significant for that. And whether they come to you through an event or social media or other means, a major gift is always a satisfying feeling. And before you can start enjoying the success that comes with major gift fundraising, it's really important to define what a major gift is to your organization. And do they automatically go into a portfolio? Who stewards that relationship? Are they assigned to somebody? So these are all things that you should consider for your organization. Now, how do you determine that? So a good way is looking at those first-time donations that come into your organization and seeing if you get a second gift. If you get that recurring gift, that means they're more likely to become staple donors to your organization, and hopefully eventually a major donor. And what's better than a major donor? Somebody that leaves you in their will. So you want to check your database for to identify who your top 5 to 10 donors are. You can remove those outliers, like maybe a foundation grant or a corporate gift. But if you have donors who give from their family foundations, you may want to keep them still in. But then you look at the range of those top 5 to 10 donors. Is one of the significantly more than the other 4? Again, you may want to remove those outliers. But if you pick a minimum amount based on the data that you do have, an appropriate amount for a major gift is the one that you have received a few gifts of that size, just above that top level. And you can test this regularly against your database by pulling historic reports. And if there's a lot of people who've given over that amount, then you know your major gift level is too low. And if there are virtually none, then it's too high, and you want something in between. Now, if you look at when you get these gifts, what should be done? Immediately, and we think that immediate should be within 48 hours. You should send a physical handwritten letter as soon as you receive the gift. And of course, they get their automated email. They get other things that are immediate. But if your organization had access to their home address, they should be getting that within a certain time frame. If you have access to their email, hopefully they made the gift online. That's what should be prompt within 48 hours. Should be personalized. You want to ensure that you're writing to the donors directly, and that you reference the specific gift amount. So you want to be sure that it's coming off as a warm, gratuitous, a warm message with gratitude. And you want to explain how that gift will be used to further your mission. And you may want to include an example of that, what programs and services it's going to help. And if they hear that the gift is recognized, that the message was personalized, that there's some passion in that letter. One of the things I always say is if somebody reads that thank you letter, will they smile after reading it? So you want to make the donor smile. You want to make them feel glad that they gave and proud that they gave to your organization. And let them know that because of their generosity, they are now entering into a long-term relationship with a community of supporters who share similar passions. So ending it on a positive note as well. So what can you do to maximize your current donor? And we've all heard that gaining a new donor costs more than it does to retain an existing one. So when so much time is invested in finding new donors, attempting to save time by neglecting post-gift follow-up is a costly mistake. Again, stewardship is so critical to get that second gift, to get that repeat gift, to get that major gift. And there's no substitute for fundraisers thanking their supporters and asking their donor base how they feel about the impact that the organization is making. So there's a few ways in which you can maximize your current donors. And referrals are when the loyal donor base encourages others in the network to support your organization. And when you can get a donor to be a referral for you, that is saving some of the substantial cost of acquiring new donors. If you can get them to share an email or on social media, it allows them to access their network at a click of a button. You know, we oftentimes will think about word of mouth and how that used to be the best strategy. But beyond that, social media is king. We need to be on social media platforms. We need to be engaging those who are following our pages. And hopefully you have a dedicated staff member who can create content for you and continue to build a presence online for your organization. Now, retention is for donors who continue to give to your organization, and they provide a solid, reliable base for the success of your annual fund and achieving your fundraising goals. And hopefully with that donor retention, you can then get them to become one step closer to becoming a major gift donor. Now, with a reputation, loyal donors speak well of you to others. You may not see every time that this happens, but if you have a fan, if you have a donor and they're committed to your organization, your reputation and oftentimes the donor's reputation for you will make a positive impact and hopefully spark interest in public support and from other potential donors, and even the media as well. Now, when it comes to revenue, these are loyal donors. They give you with more of what your cause needs, the revenue needed to continue furthering the cause. So these are all different ways in which you can maximize your current donors and help you get more referrals, retention, increase the reputation and the revenue of your organization.
And I'll note, Muhi, that only thing I'll pop into this wonderful, presentation is that, that statistic of gaining a new donor costs 5 times more than keeping an existing one is a huge statistic that you can share with your staff, with your board, that it is really important to focus on that relationship-driven fundraising with the base of supporters that you have, and that you should really steward and engage them for purposes of ROI and health of your organization.
Definitely. One of the things that maybe we tend to shy away from these days is actually picking up the phone and using a phone for its intended purpose to make calls. It's tough because even on this end of the spectrum, yeah, I may see a missed call. I'm less likely to call back. I'm even less likely to pick up if they're not in my phone. But I'll still listen to my voicemails and, return calls or shoot a text message if I'm not available immediately. And, the way that I give, I utilize the donor advised fund. I give to the causes primarily that I am passionate about. If I see like a GoFundMe or something else come up like that, I may consider supporting those as well. And if I actually get an email from the campaign, then I will respond. Like I since I'm in this profession and maybe you're the same, like I love engaging with major gift officers, and I'm not even making major gifts, but I love it when I get that coverage. So that's probably something that we geek out about, but the average person who is not in fundraising, it may be harder to connect with them. So making sure that you do these tips that are listed here will help you maybe get that return call or that opportunity to reply to your email, and hopefully engage your donors in a meaningful way. And I can't stress this enough. Saying thanks shouldn't stop with emails and letters. So that's why a quick thank you call can help increase giving. And this is the perfect way to engage your teammates, volunteers at your organization, board members, others involved at your organization from a mission perspective. And you as a fundraising staff member, a development person on your team, and maybe even GPT can create a script, do a phone call party before major events or before year-end fundraising. So, these are things, and some of the questions that you can ask them. My favorites are, why did you make your first gift to our organization? And what keeps you giving if they're a repeat donor? And you might be surprised by their answers, and it's good to keep that information in the CRM. Sarah, any thoughts?
I actually do. I love how you're highlighting how, we have this bullet on our screen that says get others involved. And I love the idea of involving your program staff or your volunteers or your board members in, a thankathon, a time to either physically get together or, host a Zoom party in which folks are calling from other places, just to thank your donors. Your donors are the reason that all of you are, supporting your organizations and the communities that you serve. And they are really not often thanked in a way that is meaningful to them. And so our slide mentioning don't be afraid to call is really important to not only foster that relationship with your donors and give you those one-on-one touch point opportunities, but also foster the relationship with your community at large, which includes your programmatic staff, which includes your volunteers, your interns, your new board members who might want to get involved in some creative way. So there are lots of things that we can provide to you as tips as far as those questions or scripts that you may be interested in providing as tools. So I would also note, if you go on our website, we have an online learning portal that has tons of stewardship suggested donor questions that you can check out to prepare anyone who you'd like to get engaged in this work.
Definitely. And when I was at the American Red Cross, you know, my portfolio was like 300 and some people. This is back in 2015 to 2019. So hopefully their portfolios are smaller now. But I would have to pick a segment of that to call each week. And, you know, we were encouraged to have metrics for how many phone calls we made, how many letters we sent, emails, essentially touch points. And moves management is one philosophy. And for such a large organization, and to be able to really hone in a portfolio, it is effective, but it also can make the job a little monotonous. So these tips of saying the donor's name, of acknowledging their giving history, and asking these questions can make it less monotonous. And every single opportunity to engage your donor is really what should excite you about being in these roles, about creating touch points for your donor. So again, I know sometimes the philosophy and the way in which our organization asks us to engage donors may not meet or see eye to eye. But if you really think about it in the sense of finding that finding that diamond in the rough, of getting that one person who actually picks up, who actually engages with you and tells you that they're not, doesn't say that they're busy, and genuinely has a conversation with you. We live for those moments. So
right.
Hopefully from that perspective, it's a little bit more encouraging for you to get behind the phone and make these calls. I know that, when I receive a call, I try to make the opportunity to make it a cheerful one, because being a fundraiser, being a developing person, I know how painstaking it can be. So I want to make sure that whenever I receive those calls from nonprofits, that I try to make it a positive experience for them too.
I love that. And then I'll just note, I dropped a resource in the chat for all of you to check out some donor stewardship conversation questions. But I'd also love, as Muhi moves to the next slide, I think it's going to be relevant if you have folks in the chat, our wonderful colleagues, if you have thoughts about tips for when you make any stewardship calls. If you've called a donor to thank them for a gift, do you have tips to share with us? I'd love to hear them, to see if we can, collaborate on how we can all help one another in these stewardship engagements, whether that is on the phone or in another fashion, to make sure that we are all doing our best to be genuine and really have the interest of creating those relationships with donors ever at heart.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on this is, really, if I do catch somebody on the phone, I'm half the time so excited, right? And I really lead with, just like Michelle said, I always tell them immediately who I am and what org I'm calling with when I call, but I make sure that I simply say, this is just a thank you call. I wanted to let you know how important your gift is to our organization. So thank you. If you have a few moments, I'd love to tell you how impactful your gift has been for our beneficiaries. And then just quickly, one or two things, and then ask them the questions. So at that point, they're more at ease and they can accept your call and listen in. So thanks for the awesome suggestions in the chat as well.
Yeah, I love these tips in the chat. Keep them coming. We've got folks saying that, mentioning your name and the organization you're with is paramount. I got Fridays are great days to make calls. People are generally happier and I get more people to pick up. I absolutely love that. I've got someone saying we host tours for our donors. So we always invite them when I call to thank them and let them know it is not for fundraising, even if they leave a voicemail. Saying that I'll be emailing some information about impact, right? Sometimes during the holidays, we even have someone in the chat mentioning that the team creates gift baskets and personally delivers them to donors' houses. A great way to thank them and also feel really special for us driving to them. This is a great segue into your next presentation, Muhi. I'll let you take it away.
Definitely. So, this webinar is my mountaintop and I'm going to shout it. Stewardship is so important for donor retention. So, the national average for donor retention is about 45%. And the way to do the math on that is you take your number of repeat donors this year over the number of people who donated last year. So for example, if you have 159 donors who gave again this year, but had 300 who gave last year, your donor retention rate would be 53%. So, as a donor, I'm assuming that many of you are donors as well to the causes that you're passionate about. When you've given, how was their outreach to you? And this is why I love seeing donation pages, because even I'll do like a test donation and see what comes through. What are other organizations doing differently than what I'm doing at my organization? And if we're able to treat everyone like a major donor, what are those things that will set your organization apart and really make that donor feel like they are a major donor to your organization, whether it's a $5 donation or a $5,000 donation? And what are ways in which that we can do this in even our virtual world, right? Many of us are still now getting more comfortable back in office, if we're not already back in office, or it's a hybrid role. And maybe if we're not driving to donors' homes, but trying to engage them in a way, how can you still make a donor feel like they're a major donor in a virtual way? And again, we have to be cautious because there's a fine but very distinct line between being a donor and actively fostering a mutually beneficial relationship with frequent contact. And the real difference comes not from when you follow up, but how. And there are 3 keys to donor retention that will help you learn how to follow up and connect with your donors. So if we're able to think like a donor, this will be the first essential step in learning how to think like a donor, is to be a donor yourself, right? And what emotions are you feeling when you're making that gift? And think of that feeling. And when you become a donor to a cause, you work to fundraise, or it will impress your prospects as well. So imagine being able to say, join me in becoming a fellow supporter of our cause. That's a much more impactful statement than saying, would you consider making a gift to our organization, right? And if you actually get to know your donor, another way to think like a donor comes when you get to know your donors better. And it's not just through making the follow-up call or finding a social media account and following them on Twitter or LinkedIn and trying to get to know bits and pieces about them. But when you can, the best way to get to know your donors is to offer them an opportunity to become involved in more meaningful ways that go beyond writing a check, right? I had a donor in my Red Cross portfolio. He started out as a blood volunteer. He couldn't give blood himself because he was born in England and they had the whole mad cow disease thing, which is now retroactive. Like people who were in that era can now give blood. But he came to our organization as a volunteer. And then it turns out he was a retired tech executive, just wanting to do something good with his time. Then it was like, okay, what skill sets does he have? Executive. Then found that he was inclined to join our board. Then he became a donor to the Red Cross as well. And slowly but surely, he joined the board, became the board chair years later, and was hyperly engaged. But if it wasn't for him becoming a volunteer with our organization and us taking the time to get to know him as a person, we wouldn't have been able to get to the place where we were with his engagement as not only a volunteer board member, but a major gift donor as well. So it's when you get to know your donors in a more meaningful way, it gives you a competitive advantage to communicate with them more effectively. And it allows you as relationship managers to go the extra mile, be willing to give your donors more than they demand and far more than they expect. And if you can act from the desire to serve and not from the desire to gain, that will give you a lot of credibility in their eyes. And when you make this your policy for engaging with donors, you will do whatever you must to be of use and of service to your donors. And when you can determine your donor's base level of satisfaction and keeping an open and regular flow of communication, this really sets your organization at the top of their mind when they're ready to make a commitment to you.
I love that about, setting the tone and continuing a regular flow of communication. We have some other tips from colleagues in the chat that really support this strategy. Where Matthew says our organization also has signature donor appreciation events targeted for each donor level in our organization, with stewardship gifts during the event and after with thank you videos. I love these tips as they are targeted to donor levels or things about the donor. Each level or each thing I would even say about your donor helps them feel special, helps them feel appreciated, because those gifts or those communications are specific to, in Matthew's case in the chat, speaking about their giving level. But I would even share with our colleagues, giving level is one great, amazing tool to steward your donors, but something about your donor, like were they once a volunteer, something about their constituency, do they live in a certain area of town, are they connected with these certain people, like all of these things really drive relationship driven stewardship because they are unique to that donor. Anything to make them feel special. I'll let you continue on, Muhi, but I just wanted to elevate that note from the chat about some signature donor appreciation events or touch points.
For sure. And those videos are so important. And even if you have the opportunity, cell phones have such great cameras these days, and you can do something easy and set up. And even if it's just 30 seconds, a minute or less at most, simply thanking them. And you can attach that to an email or send it by other means. Super effective. And I was recently reading Donor-Centered Fundraising by Penelope Burke, and she says that 45% of donors said that it was an outstanding thank you letter that inspired them to give again. So again, that is huge. If you can change your form thank you letter to an inspiring thank you letter that's engaging, you will hopefully have a repeat donor. And 23% said that they gave more generously because of the quality of the acknowledgement that they received. So these are tried and true. And your donors aren't expecting to see a flyover airplane leaving their name written in the sky. They just want a more personalized letter or card congratulates them for contributing. And you can use technology as well. Many of the CRM programs can help generate automated but personalized email confirmations and thank you messages. And really on this last point of treating everybody like a major donor, when it comes to your donors, they want to feel special. And in many ways, it is as much about their need as it is about the needs of your organization. And again, whether it's $5 or $500, $5,000, the person that's giving that is because it partially is doing it because they need to give it as well. And there's a lot about altruism. There's a lot about the way people feel when they make a donation that comes into play for them. So the extent to which you go to thank those donors involves segmenting them on their level of giving, but oftentimes we only follow up with those major donors or donors who give at a higher level. And that is a common mistake that many nonprofits do. And again, every donation should receive that acknowledgement. And if you've ever made a small donation to an organization and received no recognition or acknowledgement, it doesn't really make you feel that good. So again, whether it's a $5 donation or a $500 or $5,000 donation, you want to make sure that they're properly acknowledged. And whenever you receive a first-time donor to your organization, the ball is in your court. You have the opportunity to make them a repeat donor the next time they're engaged and they're ready to give again. So make sure that you come from that perspective of how can we get this donor who just made their first gift to make another gift in 6 months or in a year. And oftentimes we've heard that you should be thanking a donor 7 different times before you ask them to give again. So come up with that timeline. What does that look like? And sometimes large organizations can more easily ignore these small donations simply because they get so many. But for small nonprofits, every dollar truly counts. So you want to make sure that those donors understand that. And smaller organizations can't afford to lose these potential donors. The attrition rate is often so high that we need to acquire new prospects and new donors. So you really need to think of your donors as your portfolio of assets. Find out who they are, what potential they have, why they became donors in the first place, and with the right amount of caring for these donors, you will have more major donors eventually than you ever imagined you might. So we all want to feel special and needed, and your small donors are no different. And whether they're an annual donor, a renewed donor, somebody who came from an event, these are all ways to move them through the pipeline to becoming a major donor. One of my favorite things to do, it gives me such pleasure is when I can win back a donor. I don't know if you guys do the same, but looking at that data is really what motivates me. And when you can concentrate your efforts to segment your list and look at your donors from the last 3 to 5 years, many times they maybe forgot to give, or maybe they were never asked again, or maybe the acknowledgement and recognition wasn't as sincere as it could have been. And maybe they weren't inspired to give it, but you have to look at why that was the case. So there's always going to be people who just stop giving. It could be a financial circumstance or a disagreement with the direction that your organization went, or even loss of interest and demands on their time. But there's always ways that an organization can overcome that. And hopefully, when portfolio management works, you can reduce the risk of attrition. So there are ways where you can concentrate your efforts, and winning back donors may require a significant investment of your time and resources, but plan accordingly. What are those things that you're doing to re-engage lapsed donors at your organization? And how are you identifying that? And in terms of maximizing your efforts, consider limiting your attention to donors who've given in the last 3 years. And if you focus on that, hopefully there's more ability to engage those donors and re-engage them in a positive way. And it's really important that when you are re-engaging them, that you remember that every single one of your donors was once inspired to click the donate button. So try to get them thinking about what it was that first drew them to your organization. And say your organization has an anniversary year coming up, or some other way to acknowledge their first gift and why it's important for them to give again, because you're still continuing that same important work that inspired them to give the first time. And maybe they gave because a board member asked them to, or they were connected to somebody in your organization who's no longer there. That's still not a reason just to not reach out to them. So leave it up to the donor to make that decision. It would be my advice. And again, we talked about picking up the phone and calling. We talked about maybe doing a segmented email, even a letter. All of these are great ways to re-engage them. And oftentimes, a good way to do this is by shaking up your email list. There's a term in the nonprofit world known as the unemotionally subscribed. And these are people who remain in your database, who have not opened an email or clicked on an email message from your organization in a longer period of time. They haven't unsubscribed, which oftentimes is one of my favorite things to do. But they also haven't marked your message as spam. Maybe it's going to an old email box, maybe it's in junk somewhere, but hopefully sending a "we miss you" from your personal email and not from the email newsletter will jog up your organization in their inbox. And hopefully it will get opened. And there's still ways for you to, it was Valentine's Day, this week. What a better way to utilize this Hallmark holiday as a way to engage our lapsed donors. A "we miss you," like Michelle said, fantastic opportunity for engaging them. So build these things into your calendar, into your communication plan, into your development plan, in your strategic plan. Have them as KPIs for your organization. how many lapsed donors will you target? Will you engage? What's the revenue you're going to collect from these lapsed donors? These are all ways to incentivize your team to focus on these lapsed donors. And just remember that no one method is better than another. It's really about what works best for the donor. So maybe once you have that rapport with the donor, text message might be better than the phone call. Or if they tell you that email is the best way, you stick to that way. So any other thoughts that come to mind, Sarah, for winning back lapsed donors?
Yeah, I love that. And I'll elevate a couple items from the chat as well. And thank you so much for popping in your comments, because it really supports all of us. So we have some folks saying, Michelle, I wrote some handwritten "we miss you" cards today. I personally love that. I'm a big fan of the handwritten card because it takes some time out of your day to really do something authentic for someone else. And I think Muhi is correct in thinking about the modality that you send these communications to your lapsed donors, whether that is a "we miss you" email or a card. We have another comment from some folks in the chat. Christine says, as a donor myself, I have a different reaction to "we miss you." Feels a little guilt inducing, which is also, I want to acknowledge, a completely valid feeling. I think that there are different ways, like Muhi mentioned, no method or no exact copy is better than another. I think that it's really important to consider what maybe is a better framework or a better realistic statement that feels genuine to you and genuine to your donors and the donors to your cause. I saw so many different causes in the welcome chat that each of you are a part of that all serve different needs in your community. So think about the audience that you serve and think about the audience of your donors that contribute to that service and what would be meaningful to them. That one-on-one relationship building for either winning back lapsed donors or continuing to steward engaged donors is all unique and personal. So just some food for thought for all of us in the room.
So as we shift into wrapping up, I hope that you have some practical tips and practical ways of ensuring really looking at what you are currently doing in your development job for stewardship and thinking through where are some gaps, where are some opportunities to create a stronger stewardship experience. And Christine mentioned, I guess I'd only want to hear it if it really means they missed me, not just my gift. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And hopefully through these opportunities for engaging your donors, relationship officers and managers can actually build a relationship with the donor so that is the case.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to hear that Natasha said, I'm less scared of AI after this. Because that was definitely one of my things that I wanted to, share with everybody is a little bit more on AI. So I'm glad that resonates.
That's so fun, and I'll let you, Muhi, go into the last formal slide we have for you all as a summary. But I love that. I'll circle back to our wonderful learner Christine that says, we want to be building those relationships with donors because you do miss them, their time, their talent, and their treasure, not just their gift. Muhi's example of the volunteer who was volunteering at the blood donation sites, I think is a great example because donors can come in all shapes and sizes, and they can come in all different capacities. So it's very rewarding to hear that all of you as professional fundraisers on this call can think about the standpoints of all the different constituents in your organization and how to engage and steward them. So Muhi, I'll leave to you to summarize, and then we will be moving into our formal Q&A.
Yes, course. And there's a reason the nonprofits is a wholly separate world from the for-profit sector. Certainly, there are many parallels, and efficiency should always be the case for the nonprofit sector as well. But ultimately, as a nonprofit, you are working to make the world a better place in some way. And yes, the money is important, but unlike our for-profit counterparts, it's not the bottom line. The cause and its supporters are what counts. Now, through proper communication and cooperation, you can enable donors of sizes to fully experience the unique joy of giving. So a one-time donation can be turned into a lifelong relationship through positive, effective follow-up and stewardship procedures that hopefully you're implementing at your organization. Let them know that their gift adds value, and let them know that you appreciate them. These follow-up actions can be more important than the actual gift itself. And there are three key things to reducing donor attrition. And it is for you to think like a donor, for you to get to know your donors better, and for you to treat every donor like a major donor. So hopefully these are some tidbits that will help you win back your lapsed donors. These are some tidbits that will help you foster deeper relationships with your donors. And hopefully you can follow a specific plan for communicating with donors after the gift to ensure that it won't be their last gift to your organization.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Muhi, for the engaging presentation. And thank you, all of you, for your meaningful chats and your meaningful engagement with one another on this topic of stewardship for your donors, but really for all members of your organization. So as I mentioned, we're going to move into our formal conversation, or our dedicated conversation with Muhi, and utilizing the Q&A feature. So with everyone in the room still, I would love to offer the Q&A feature of your Zoom controls to think through some questions for either Muhi, myself, or your colleagues. I can go ahead and read aloud any of those that we want to collaboratively come together and brainstorm about. Submit any questions or comments you have during the presentation, into your Zoom controls. While you're typing in those questions or thinking about what we might want to ask our talented Muhi Khwaja, I also wanted to note a couple of housekeeping items. For those who have enjoyed this presentation and enjoy this kind of collaborative style, we have our next webinar upcoming on March 15th. So you can save the date for that. It will be entitled Spring into Monthly Giving. And I think it's so meaningful that Muhi talked about how that third key is treat everyone like a major donor. And when I say everyone, I think it can mean folks who in your database may be overlooked that are giving, say, monthly to your organization. How can we steward them? So I'm really excited and hope to see some of your names and faces on that webinar as well to utilize the skills you've learned today. I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat for where you can find the registration for our next upcoming engaging conversation.
Yeah, and monthly giving is so critical. We often think that it's just on autopilot, it's going to be there. But I would say one of the things that I learned was that monthly donors are more likely to be planned giving donors for you as well. So the fact that they're giving to you monthly and ongoing makes them more likely that they will leave your organization in their will. And what better way to keep somebody engaged? You want to make sure that they're happy with their stewardship and are being acknowledged. Sure, they may not need a gift receipt every single month, or a touch point every single month, but make sure that when you do reach out, it is very unique. It is, and that you're not re-soliciting them because it's already automatic. But your communication with them is done in a meaningful way. So I see a question. that came in. One in the chat from Michelle was, I'd love to hear how others have successfully recaptured lapsed donors. So anybody in the chat, feel free to drop in your suggestions there. And we have 2 questions in the Q&A. So Andrea mentions, what are tips to get more monthly donors and retaining your monthly donor? Yeah, that is a great question.
I was going to say, Andrew, you should come to our next month's webinar, but Muhi, I'll let you take a stab at that too, but also definitely come on next month as well, because we have a different expert to talk about monthly giving. But I think some of the tips that Muhi shared about stewardship engagement may actually help support monthly givers too. What are your thoughts, Muhi, on how to get more monthly donors and retain them?
Yeah, I think oftentimes when I'm trying to retain a donor who's made a first-time gift, and let's say their first gift was $500, and it's the start of the new year, or I want to re-engage them, I'd often ask them, hey, would you be willing to consider a gift of $50 a month? And oftentimes that would be easier for them instead of dropping $500 all at once. But when you want their gift, it becomes $600 through the year. So it's a great way to increase their giving. And oftentimes, even with lapsed donors, it could be a great way. Say they made a $500 donation 2 years ago. Let's get them in. Maybe that's the strategy, is if you want to increase your monthly donor giving program, look at all your lapsed donors, again, from the last 3 years, and maybe make that push for a monthly giving program. And you're working on retention, you're working on focused relapse donors and monthly giving all at the same time. So just a small idea.
I love those ideas. And I have another thought, Andrea, that maybe you could think about. I have, from my personal fundraising experience, I came from an events fundraising background, and similar to Muhi, sometimes you run into folks who are like, oh, I can't spend $1,000 right now. That's that seems like a ton of money to drop all at once. And so in some of the organizations I've served, we came up with the idea of, and instead of asking for, hey, event giver, can you give us $1,000 at this event? Would you like to join the $83 a month club? It's kind of a cool club where, $83 a month, you could actually be giving $1,000 to our organization. So kind of rethinking a creative way to, come up with different ways that people can support you. Some of those ways may be breaking something like a large gift into a monthly donation, because it's more helpful for the way that they are currently kind of living through their life, and it'll make them feel a little bit more uniquely stewarded that you came up with an idea to support them. Another thing, I think part of the question was about stewarding those monthly donors, and something I would offer to that is an idea of like milestone markers. So some of the other organizations I've served under in, say, the higher education space, maybe we had a lot of folks who were like giving their monthly donors for, I don't know, for a long period of time. Maybe the amount didn't matter, but they'd be giving some amount, maybe a small amount, for 5 years, for 10 years. So what are you sending on the anniversary of their first gift 5 years later, 10 years later? You can think of creative ways to do that and celebrate them at milestones meaningful to them.
I love the recognition piece on that. Really, do you have somebody at your organization that maybe the donors would like to hear from? And that
great.
could
That's
be a special
idea.
Access to exclusive monthly donors. And think of different ways of like, what gifts could you provide to your monthly donors that you don't to your regular donors? And what other things could be special recognition specifically for your monthly donors?
I think that
Uh,
leads into another question, Muhi. Do you see this in the Q&A that asks from Akemi? Looks like, what strategies to authentically connect with donors who give mid to large gifts on a regular basis, but are simply happy to give and not necessarily interested in additional touch points like donor events? There are individuals who give at a mid or large gift touch point that are not interested in events. So external of that, what else could we be doing? I think we mentioned videos. Let's keep on going with this brainstorm train.
yeah, you know, donors want to see their gifts supporting the mission, and sometimes they don't want to go to a glitzy or fancy event. So you're going to have to implement different strategies for different types of donors. And when you want to connect with those mid to large gifts and the donors who make them, hopefully they're the ones who are willing to meet face to face then, and really get that update from you and your team. Maybe bring a volunteer along who works directly with the beneficiaries of your organization. Ask them if they're willing to hear directly from your teammates. Think about other touch points in events. It could be a virtual coffee, it could be an in-person coffee. Think what works differently for those subsets of donors who don't want to go to events. And oftentimes the face-to-face meetings will be a good way for them. Or it could just be a phone call and you have that conversation and you have like a follow-up piece that you offer, and just give them a heads up, like, I know, you won't be able to make it to our event this year, but would love to provide you with this over email or some other way to get your vision and mission and impact delivered to them in a more meaningful way.
I love that, Muhi. You know what I think I will elevate from your advice is that you can choose multiple modalities to steward your donors. We are sharing things, that are additional touch points. People who are simply happy to give, they don't really need to go to a donor event. Some don't want that, but Muhi, like Muhi mentioned, a face-to-face stewardship meeting is great. But also, what could you bring to that face-to-face donor stewardship meeting? Could you bring a volunteer? Could you bring a recipient of that scholarship? Could you bring a thank you letter from that recipient of that scholarship? Or could you bring a donor impact report they can review at a later date? So you're kind of building upon these different ways to thank your donor in one engagement. I see also, I put in the chat, we'd love to hear from you too. Let's help each other out. Sharon says we've been sending personalized video messages as part of our stewardship activities. It gives that personal face-to-face touch, even in a hybrid environment. So I love these ideas. I know that I've used a platform called Thank You to do something similar in another role. So I think it's really fun to kind of creatively come up with different ways to thank your donor, even if they're saying, I really don't need, some donors are going to say, I don't really need stuff, or I don't really need an invite to the donor salon. But what they may really enjoy is a personalized video message, just a quick little tidbit like, oh, someone was thinking of me in a way that is unique and a little bit different. So I would really push for those customized stewardship touch points. And I would even say like a donor impact report if you are at an organization that does some sort of annual impact reporting, which I highly recommend for your organizations, because it sounds like you do so much great work in the community based on the names of all your orgs and your donation pages. I just checked out a few of them, that maybe you're sending them a printed copy of the donor impact report with one sheet that's like a quick typed letter from you thanking them, the person, not just the giver of the gift, but them as a holistic human being, and slipping that into the donor impact report. So just some fun things to know about.
Yeah, and Michelle also commented saying that she likes to give monthly donors a sneak peek on some exciting news before it goes public.
I love that idea.
to do that. Sharon mentioned the personalized videos as part of their stewardship activities and giving it a face-to-face touch, even in a hybrid environment. I love that as well. Andrew's question came in. So, what tips do you have to get new event sponsors and to make sure previous sponsors come back to sponsor? I love this one because Fundraising Academy is actually a conference that all of you are invited to on June 1st, Thursday, down in San Diego, called Cultivate, and there'll be more information on that. We're working on a sponsorship outreach. So, especially for like a first time event, or if it's a repeat event, your annual gala, you know, think about the exposure that you have, how many people are on your email list. Are you going to recognize sponsors in print mail? Are you going to be putting them on social media? What's the footprint that you have access to? That can help engage new event sponsors. If you think about your impact of, what their sponsorship can help achieve in terms of your mission. Is it a $500 sponsorship level or a $50,000 sponsorship level? And what will that help your mission achieve? Not only focusing on the exposure for the organization and brand that sponsors your event, but in terms of your impact, what will that help you achieve? And I think companies or individuals that want to sponsor also care about the impact that the organization is making, and that's really why they're giving to your organization, because maybe they won't see a return from a business perspective, but they really want to be in the community doing good as well. So think about what those dollar handles are for your mission and impact, but making sure previous sponsors come back. Hopefully they had a good experience, and treat them like a major donor. So you're stewarding them to get them to come back. So yeah, Sarah, any thoughts?
Love that. That's exactly what I was going to say. That tip number 3, that third key is one of my favorites from the Fundraising Academy. That is, treat everyone like a major donor. And when we say everyone, that also includes sponsors. And same thing, that sponsors are more than just a company or organization, but how are you cultivating a relationship with that community relations manager? How are you cultivating a relationship and stewarding the relationship with your point of contact at that sponsorship organization? Those are ways that you can be following up with them throughout the year, not during the event time. I think that's a great tip on how to get folks to sponsor year over year. And then another follow-up I would note, just to add on to Muhi's amazing tips and suggestions to answer that question, is recapping, reminding them kind of what that impact was throughout the last year, or like at the last event. So not only sending your event sponsor, the recap video of last year's event, which I'm sure will spark a lot of joy and bring them back all that goodwill and good feeling about, oh yeah, this was a great event. Like, we loved it. We had a presence there. People had a great time. Folks came up to me. I got to meet new individuals. I got to meet new members of my community. But you could pair that, like Muhi said, to share a little bit about the impact that the organization has made since their last sponsorship gift. So pairing both the event stewardship and also the actual core mission of your organization, giving them updates, is really how you can treat that sponsor donor just like a major donor. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions that Muhi and I both have in the Q&A feature and in the chat. We really, really encourage continuing connections with all of you. So I'm going to leave this slide up for just a second here, where we're asking you to connect with us. This has been such a fun and engaging conversation for myself, and for having Muhi on here as an expert and sharing all of his wisdom from all the different areas in which he has stewarded and shared impact about the donors to various organizations. we have added our LinkedIn handles over here on the right side of the slide, where you can connect with Fundraising Academy on LinkedIn. We post a lot of great tips and opportunities just like this. Muhi shared a bit, but definitely be following along on LinkedIn as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are at Cause Selling Ed at that handle. That we'll have some exciting announcements on events of our own as well. So definitely follow along. We would love to connect with you and continue the conversation and really keep on stewarding our donors and stewarding our relationships with one another as colleagues too. And then the last slide that we have for you today, before our thank you and end, is our opportunity and our invitation to you to join us on our online learning portal. So if you are a learner who enjoys working at your own pace, checking out some tips like donor conversation questions, learning a little bit more or more deeply about the cause selling cycle, this is your one-stop shop. Everything, including the recording of this webinar and access to the library of our past webinars, is actually available at no cost to you on our online learning portal. I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat for all of you. It's very quick and easy to sign up, no cost to you. As we go into this new year in 2023, I encourage you to continue gaining meaningful education and fundraising tips at your own pace, on your own time, to really further your career, but also empower you, the fundraiser, the person, and empower your causes that you all shared about earlier on this webinar as we each work to better and serve our community. So with that, that brings us to the end of our time together. Thank you all for your amazing participation in today's webinar. Last minute reminders, you will be receiving a link to access this particular slide deck and recording in a follow-up email in the coming days. Thank you, Muhi, for being an amazing presenter and joining us and sharing your expertise on these important subjects, helping us feel a little bit less afraid about AI, helping us think through how we can use technology to foster and build meaningful relationships. Thank you to our audience for your time, your talent, your treasures, your participation in our conversation today. It was so much fun getting to know each and every one of you, joining from all over the country. So please take a few minutes to complete our survey. It's going to appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. Muhi and I would love your feedback. And thank you so much for all that you do in your communities. We hope to see you again in March. Have a great day, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.